It's the climate cause. Hello and welcome to the Climate Cause. I'm Maddie Rez, and I'm interviewing people to explore how they relate to climate change and what they're doing about it. It's going to be another great episode. Thanks for listening. And as always, this episode is made in partnership with Ecological Design Network. Visit their website, ecologicaldesignetwork.com, to find out how they can help you.
So I'm very excited to have Catherine Rohan here. She is a transportation planner in Oregon. She and I go back a couple years. We went to the University of Oregon together, and we met in a group called Live Move, which is a transportation advocacy group that hosts events, does some planning work, and is just involved in the community of sustainable, equitable, and livable transportation and communities. So welcome, Catherine. Say hello and introduce yourself.
Hi, Maddie. Thanks so much. Yeah, we do go back a couple of years. It feels like forever now with the pandemic. But as you said, I'm a transportation planner for the Albany Area Metropolitan Planning Organization out of Albany, Oregon, not Albany, New York. I've had people get confused, very different places. But yeah, I'm from Texas originally. I was born and raised in Houston. I also have a background in environmental science from the University of Texas, which I never used, but really enjoyed. And I think what led me to transportation was really some experiences I had after my undergraduate degree. I got to travel a lot, which was amazing. And I got to see these great cities around the world, like, Rome and Paris and Barcelona, and kind of compare, these cities that are, very active, transportation focused, a lot of rail, to, the Houston suburbia, the sprawling suburbia I grew up in, and just realizing that, we can do things differently that, improve the environment, improve our social, and mental health. And yeah, just wanting to understand that link is really what drew me to planning at the University of Oregon, where we met. So that's kind of the long and short of it.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing a little bit about your background and the experience that led you to where you are today. And so you're a transportation planner now in the state of Oregon. And this work is, these realizations and this work has brought you to this point. And so I want to ask a first question, and it's a relatively big question, but I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. How do you connect the dots between climate action, adaptation, and resilience as an opportunity for improving society as a better?
That is a good question, which I'm also glad you sent me ahead of time, because I had a chance to write down a few bullets that I'll try to expand on here. But, I think I'm a huge proponent for bicycles, which, I just developed in the past couple of years, really. And I see bicycles, as being great for climate action, just because so much of our greenhouse gas emissions, right, come from the single occupancy vehicles that, we take everywhere, every day, especially in the suburbs. But, kind of getting to the second part of your question, whereas how is that an opportunity for improving society for the better? I think what really drew me to bicycles are not, the benefits really related to climate change or, physical health. But really, when you're riding a bike, I think you're more in tune with your surroundings. So that's, the natural and the built environment, as well as the people around you. And I think, seeing things at that level, at that pace, can really generate a lot of curiosity and empathy. And I think both of those are really key components of creating a society, that's more environmentally conscious and also more equitable and more accepting of differences. So that's my plug there for sure. But I mentioned there's just so many benefits that come along with encouraging and engendering more bicycling. So your mental and physical health benefits, I think especially for young children, having some kind of autonomy at a younger age, learning how to navigate the world can be great. I just think of all of the time I spent in the back of my mom's Suburban,
Right.
doing nothing, right? Like watching TV almost. Kids do that on iPads now all the time in cars. Maybe not the best way for them to spend their time.
I definitely see and appreciate this perspective that you're providing, that not only is, mixing up our transportation specifically through using bicycle travel, it checks the boxes for being more environmentally friendly, for the direct impacts on our health and our mood, but also what you were talking about on the way that it connects us to our community and what's surrounding us. And with it, I know on my bike rides, like I just have this glowing or beaming feeling of just gratitude. Mostly probably because I live in Oregon and it's beautiful, and not to look down on any other place. I just have this unique, or not this profound love for just being outside, specifically on a bicycle, that I hadn't really experienced before. And to the point you were saying of if we can encourage children or people who are younger to be clicked in or cued into this way of life, it's starting them off in a complete different way than we were able to grow up.
Yeah, I think of, like citizen involvement, and it's just, I feel like it's really lagging in some areas, and just, tuning into your environment, the people around you, that curiosity, I think is hard to replace.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned how these things motivate you and how you're able to connect the dots on the ways that bicycles and transportation are influential in our relationship to our community and our effects on the environment abroad. So in your role, in your life, how do you, what is a tool that you use that you know to be true in your work, your climate work, and why?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of people, they see the bicycle kind of just as something you do for recreation, either that or it's something that only old white men in Lycra do on the weekends. And that's definitely like how I viewed it growing up. We would put the bikes in the back of my dad's truck and drive them somewhere to ride them, which, it's like, what are we doing? But that's a separate story, because there weren't any safe places to ride, which we also need more of. But I just want to, make the point that, anyone really can ride a bike. You don't need special clothes or anything like that. There's even adaptive bicycles now if a traditional bicycle doesn't work for you. And I would just, encourage everyone, kind of like you said, Maddie, to get on a bike, and you'll experience kind of that glow that you mentioned, because it's really fun to arrive at a destination kind of under your own power. And it sounds a little goofy to say, but it's kind of just like yes, I did it. So, whether that's, a trip to the library where you take a backpack so you can put your books in it, or a trip to a friend's house or a local coffee shop. Anyone can do it. You don't have to be an old man in Lycra going 50 miles down the road for some race, like not at all. And really, most of our trips are between, 3 and 5 miles, outside of the commute trip, which I feel like we're too focused on. But that 3 to 5 mile range, that's perfect for a bike. You don't necessarily want to walk. Sometimes it feels silly to get in the car and crank it up to go that short distance. But a bike is great. And I don't know, Maddie, I know when I started riding a bike to actually get places, it was really scary for me. Was it scary for you? Was that a barrier you faced?
It was definitely scary. And I think there were a lot of considerations I had to make and alterations to my normal travel.
Mm-hmm.
But
And
emphasizing like it was scary to,
yeah. I didn't, I wasn't used to riding like next to cars, even when there was a bike lane, like that was super scary for me. And I think if, things that I did that helped me overcome that barrier was, I found a friend who biked a little bit more, and I would bike with that person because, there's a lot of us have gone through driver's ed, but there's not really a biker's ed,
right.
that's not out there. So finding a friend I thought was really helpful. And I
Yeah,
don't,
absolutely.
I also started riding on these huge, clunky city bikes. They're blue. If you've ever seen the Peace Health bikes in Eugene, they're blue and you can't miss them.
They own my
And
heart.
they own your heart. Well, they are great because if you're driving, it's almost like you have a student biker sticker on your back when you're on one of those big city bikes, which, made me less conscientious of, am I doing the right thing? I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, now these people know I don't know what I'm doing either. So it felt less stressful being on those bikes. So if you have city bikes in your area, I would suggest getting on one of those too.
Yeah, that's such a valuable point that you just raised, that these bikes are really an elementary introduction for a lot of people to biking. I say that the Peace Health bikes own my heart because they do, in a sense. It was the first the bikes were installed, the system was installed right around the same time that I entered the School of Planning, Public Policy and Management, and was starting to connect the dots on how transportation is so important to our local community. And I was able to actually see the community for the first time. That I was a college student who had no access to a car and was in a place that I had very limited experience with. And so these bikes were I really love the way that you raised that for so many people like myself as well, it's like a first free pass to, low stakes. The bikes are
Exactly.
wide. They're a little heavy. I've definitely like had some scraped knees trying to like get myself acclimated. But I think that interventions like the Peace Health bikes that are these like very user friendly modes, would you agree, or do you feel similar that it's like an opportunity to plant those seeds for
I
those
think
who
it's a great, it like lowers that barrier because they're right there. It's like a quick app download. You don't have to buy a bike. You don't have to buy bike lights. They have a nice basket up front, which is really handy. You put your backpack in there or something.
right
Um, and what else I think is great is a lot of these city bikes on their apps, you have maps that, kind of tell you where the other stations are if you have to dock your bike in a station. But something else I'm a huge proponent of, if you're first going to start biking, is knowing your route, having a route. Just like if you're going to drive somewhere, you're going to know your route. Well, if you bike, you want to know that too. And Google Maps has, biking directions now, which make it so much easier. I know I feel a lot more comfortable if I know where I'm going. And you can even look in Google Street View, make sure that the street, it looks comfortable for you. Are you someone who definitely wants bike lanes? Well, you can check that out. Another pro tip I bought, one of the best things I've ever bought, is this like little black stretchy phone holder that goes on my handlebars, and I just stick my phone in there and I pull up maps and it tells me exactly where I need to go. And that definitely lowers the stress and makes it a lot easier for me. No like fumbling around trying to bike with one hand. That's big no-no.
right
Google Maps has biking directions, which
okay
tend to be the more friendly streets that often have bike lanes. Sometimes they don't, if it's like a neighborhood street with slow
right
traffic.
okay
Usually they'll also have, any off-street paths that you have in your area will show up there as well. Also super fun because you can compare how long it will take you to get to your destination driving, also biking, and you're like, oh, it's 2 extra minutes, and sometimes it's even faster. So that's a fun comparison to be able to make, fun little game.
Right. And we think that a car is supposed to be this super instantaneous thing. And so we just automatically think that it's that biking is the secondary option, when in reality it could be those extra 5 minutes could be, check off the box for my outside time, my sun time, my movement time, and just maybe
Yeah.
even time for me to unplug and just focus on the literal road in front of me.
Yes. And if you're like me and it takes you 5 minutes to parallel park, then the times come out exactly equal. So
That's
that
something
too.
I think about. So yeah, living here in my community in Portland, parking is so hard to find. And I think that that might be a push in the right direction to disincentivize driving when I could walk or bike just as easily and avoid a lot of the inconvenience of
Mhm.
car travel. But I it just is a unique situation we're in, that like car travel has just been so incentivized for so long
And it's
that
so ingrained too. I know we both talked about, just growing up like in that culture. And
right.
it's not something you think about. Taking a bike to get somewhere, to physically get somewhere was something I never thought about growing up.
Right. No, but now you think about it all the time, I imagine.
I do. Yeah. I try to make it I try to make it the go-to and the car the secondary option. Like if it's 3 miles or under, I'm usually going to bike it.
Right. Well, that's awesome. And are you able to help reduce some of the barriers to transportation or to biking in your day job?
I try. So I'm actually working on a bicycle and pedestrian plan for the Albany Area Metropolitan Planning Organization right
Ooh.
now, which is awesome. It's kind of the first big planning project I've had on my plate. And I can say I've learned a whole lot, just from the process. And I think what I found really interesting is we had a couple community surveys we did, and my favorite parts were the open-ended comments that people left, kind of describing, the barriers they really face when it comes to biking more. Because, infrastructure, I think, is a huge part of it. Because if you don't feel safe, you're not going to bike. That's a lot of what it comes down to. But I think there's a lot of room to be creative with the education and the outreach, and a lot of opportunities to get people excited about it. And that's really like what I love, is sharing this with other people, because I mean, I just find it amazing. And it sounds silly, but yeah, I was in my late 20s and I was like, biking is the best thing ever. And I felt like an 11-year-old. And it's just like, it's so much joy when you learn something that, kind of that essential at that age. I don't think that happens a lot. So sharing that is amazing.
Totally. And I think too that a new pathway that you've lit in my mind is, it really connects us a lot back to like our own human power and things that are innately human, like human being, having a relationship with the world around you, having a say in your community, having the capacity to be a part of what your community ends up looking like, being traveled like, and so on. And I think that I wonder what your thoughts are.
So community engagement is obviously huge. And it's, something that's been on the books for a long time. But I think what's important is recognizing that, different communities, have more trouble being a part of those conversations than other communities. If you're working really strange hours, if you have kids you have to get home to, if you don't have the luxury to be a retired person, with a car that can go to an evening community meeting, and feel comfortable enough at that meeting to, stand up and state your opinion, then, traditionally, those are people we didn't hear from. And I think we're definitely trying to change that. And I think COVID actually has helped in that progression, because we're having to find new ways to engage with people virtually which has made us really rethink how we're engaging with everyone. So if you're trying to find, communities of color or minority communities that traditionally have not been engaged, I think, one of the first things you can do is ask, what do you need to be more engaged? And then, bring that to the table for people. So if that's meeting in, community locations where people feel comfortable, like a locally owned restaurant or a place of worship. I think a lot of it is also, paying people for the time that we're asking them to commit to these projects. Because I get paid to do this work. Shouldn't other people get paid to do to give their input as well?
Right.
And that's just a recognition that there's a lot of barriers that have systematically been put in place that we need to work through. Was that the question you asked?
That was the question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for answering that in the way that you did, because I think that you touch on a key point, that there's so many, with just the natural fact that there's so many unique people in this world, and everyone has their diverse needs and situations, that it's more imperative than ever to factor that into our processes, specifically our public processes. And I think that historically, and you touch on this, historically, people who are involved in their community don't get compensation for that work, because I think maybe there's this belief that, it's benefiting their community, so they're getting a benefit, when in reality, there's a level of capacity and engagement that should be compensated, because it's legitimate work, and it takes legitimate problem solving and input and time that is important to recognize.
Yeah, I think we ask a lot of our communities, and especially, communities of color, minority populations, that it's harder. It's harder for some people, and we just need to recognize that.
Absolutely. And so as we wrap up, I kind of wanted to just ask you if there are any final thoughts that you wanted to share, maybe relating to where we are now and where we want to go.
I something I've been thinking about recently is electric vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
which I think they do hold a lot of promise, in some ways, but I also worry that we're maybe, holding them up as some great thing, and that might not actually come to fruition.
Right.
Thinking about connecting to your natural environment, connecting to the people around you. I think, you're still traveling in a metal box by yourself, which is just so isolating.
Right.
And so I have some worries about that. And, also kind of our land use patterns that enable vehicle travel traditionally works best in these really sprawling suburban places. And, that's not always great for climate either, So I don't know. I'm really interested to see where we go in the next 2 years. Really interested.
Yeah, and I think you raise a key point that, just today through our conversation, we've highlighted how, in order to bring about these improvements for our communities, i.e. a better connection, easier travel, a relationship with those around us in the natural environment, you can't really it highlights that it's not just a swapping out of solutions. It's really reimagining the system that we have now. And so I appreciate you bringing up this argument with electric vehicles. We've learned this historically. If you're only approaching one part of the issue, the rest of them still remain. And so I can really hear from the way that you've been articulating your perspective is just that we need to address these pieces as a whole, as a systems, and really see our role in it, as opposed to just welcoming in a solution that solves one of the boxes,
Yeah.
one of the short-term boxes, because you highlight that if we are still having to transport ourselves around in farther distances in electric vehicles, that has an impact. It directly connects to the energy that's needed. I appreciate that you brought in the piece of land use, because I think that if we had hours and hours to talk, I think that is a rabbit hole for sure on
Oh yeah.
how we've gotten to where we have, and specifically in our cases, our own lived experiences, how land use has created people like us who are like, hey, like, I don't want to live in a place that like it's 15 minutes to Target and like I have to be in bumper to bumper traffic. Like, I think those are legitimate circumstances that people deal with, and they don't question because they don't have the capacity or the time right now, or the resources to make those changes. So I thank you for, doing this work in the transportation world, and I look forward to our coming conversations and whatever else you're up to.
Yeah, we'll have to stay in touch. I look forward to, hearing how this series continues to go, and can't wait for some takeaways at the end too.
Absolutely. Well, Catherine, thank you so much for joining today. And we'll talk later.
Thanks, Maddie.
See ya. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to a lengthy but could be lengthier discussion on the climate cause. Check out the show notes and/or visit our website, The Climate Cause, for more information. Follow us on your socials and check out the ecologicaldesignetwork.com. Thanks!